The marble floors of the Grand Plaza Hotel gleamed under the chandeliers, every corner polished to a perfection that whispered of power and money. Guests in tailored suits and glittering gowns moved through the lobby like they were part of a stage play, their voices hushed, their faces set in masks of control. Yet tonight, the perfection of that stage cracked with a sound no one could ignore, the desperate, relentless cries of a baby. Henry Blackstone, just 9 months old, sat in an expensive leather stroller near the center of the hall, his tiny fists clenched, his face red from the effort of screaming. His father, Jonathan Blackstone, a billionaire oil tycoon known for his cold authority in boardrooms, was pacing back and forth in helpless panic. His hair, usually neat, was now slightly disheveled. His eyes darted to the clock, then back to his son, as though he could will the child to calm down through sheer force of will. But Henry's cries only grew sharper, slicing through the high ceilings and echoing against the marble like a siren of distress. Guests shifted uncomfortably. A man in a pinstripe suit lowered his newspaper with a scowl. A woman draped in diamonds covered her ears with a jeweled hand, muttering complaints to her companion. Even the doorman at the far end of the lobby shifted his stance, his polished shoes clicking nervously on the floor. Luxury had turned sour. The grandeur of the lobby felt suffocated by that sound, piercing, endless, impossible to ignore. And then, at the edge of the grand hall, someone froze in place. Amanda Silva. She was kneeling with a scrub brush in her hands, her dark hair tied back, her uniform damp with the sweat of long hours. For 3 years she had cleaned this lobby night after night, invisible to the people who walked across her polished floors. But tonight, the cries cut through her like a knife, dragging her back to memories she tried to bury. She knew this sound. Not the ordinary hunger cries, not the restless whimpering of a baby who needed rocking. No, this was pain, real pain. The way Henry arched his back, the way his tiny legs kicked, the way his fists never unclenched. It was all too familiar. Her heart clenched in her chest as she remembered her little brother Marcus, only a baby himself when their mother died. She had been 17, still a child herself, trying to soothe a screaming infant in a cramped apartment. The nights had been endless, filled with desperate cries that no doctor seemed to understand. She had learned through trial, error, and stubborn determination what others had dismissed, and now she was watching it all over again, only this time in the middle of a hotel lobby dripping with wealth. Amanda's hands trembled against the scrub brush. Her instincts screamed at her to get up, to rush forward, to pick Henry up and hold him against her shoulder until his body softened. But a voice inside her reminded her where she was. She wasn't family. She wasn't a nanny. She was a cleaner. Just another face that the guests never looked at, except when they needed someone to mop up their spilled champagne. Still, she couldn't look away. Each cry from Henry stabbed deeper, stirring emotions she thought she had buried with her mother's coffin. The boy's face was red with exhaustion, his tiny lungs straining. Jonathan Blackstone's deep voice cracked as he called for hotel staff, but no one knew what to do. They hovered uselessly, their manicured hands twitching, their polished shoes glued to the floor. Amanda's breath quickened. She whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer only she could hear. "It's reflux. I know it. I've seen it before." Her eyes lifted just enough to meet the sight of Vivian Montgomery, the hotel's executive manager, standing rigid with a thin smile plastered across her face. Vivian's sharp voice carried over the noise, laced with irritation rather than concern. "Someone, do something about this noise. Our guests cannot be disturbed like this." Amanda lowered her gaze quickly, her heart hammering. She knew better than to draw attention. Yet something stronger than fear kept her rooted to that spot. The baby's cries weren't just echoes in the lobby, they were echoes in her soul. Every sound tugged at her memory, pulled at her instincts, and begged her to act. And for the first time in 3 years of scrubbing these marble floors, Amanda Silva felt the heat of defiance rising inside her. Something was about to break, not just the silence of luxury, but the invisible chains that kept her in her place. The lobby had become a stage, and every eye was fixed on the billionaire's child. But somewhere in the shadows, unseen, the cleaning lady knew she was about to step into the light. Jonathan Blackstone was a man used to control. In the boardrooms of Houston and New York, his voice decided the fate of nations, his signature shifted the tides of global markets. But here, in the glittering lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel, with his only son shrieking uncontrollably in a stroller, he was stripped bare of that power. He bent down again, his cufflinks catching the light as he offered the bottle for the 10th time. Henry turned his head away, his small body stiff as a bowstring, his mouth a wide-open cry of defiance against comfort that never came. "Mr. Blackstone," a young concierge stammered. "Should I call the doctor?" The words trembled with the boy's fear of saying the wrong thing. Jonathan straightened up, his jaw tight. His wife was half a world away, handling a family crisis in Paris. The fall. Nanny had been fired in a moment of anger that morning, and now all that was left was a billionaire and his suffering child, and no clue how to soothe him. The air shifted, sharp as glass, when Vivian Montgomery appeared. She strode across the marble with her Louboutin heels pounding out judgment like a drumbeat. At 42, the executive manager was known for her composure, her charm when schmoozing with investors, and her merciless tongue when dealing with staff. Her perfume arrived before she did, strong and expensive, meant to declare her presence even before her voice. "Enough," Vivian snapped, her voice slicing through the chaos. "This is a five-star establishment, not a daycare. We cannot have this scene in the middle of our lobby." Her words made heads turn. Guests leaned closer, eyes flicking between the wailing baby and the flustered billionaire, savoring the spectacle as though it were a scandalous performance. Amanda, still kneeling on the floor with her scrub brush, kept her eyes down, but her pulse raced. She knew Vivian's voice too well. It carried the weight of warning. Vivian's sharp gaze swept the hall and landed on Amanda. "You, don't even think about it." Her finger pointed like an arrow, pinning Amanda in place. "Your job is to keep this marble spotless, not to interfere with our VIPs. Amanda froze, but inside her chest something twisted. She hadn't moved toward the baby, hadn't spoken a word, yet Vivian seemed to sense her thoughts, her instincts. Amanda lowered her head, but her eyes, dark, steady, unwilling, remained fixed on Henry. Every gasp of his cry was a reminder of Marcus, her little brother, who had once cried in the same way while doctors dismissed her fears as paranoia. She had been right then. She knew she was right now. Jonathan rubbed his temples, his polished image cracking under the weight of his child's agony. "Vivian, I died. Don't care about appearances. My son, he's in pain. Do something." "Of course, sir," Vivian purred, smoothing her silk blouse. But there was no compassion in her eyes, only calculation. "I'll call for security. We'll clear the crowd, remove distractions. Someone will get the baby to settle eventually." Amanda's hands clenched around the handle of her bucket until her knuckles turned white. She wanted to scream that clearing the lobby wouldn't change Henry's pain, that calling security was as useless as offering another bottle. She wanted to say she knew exactly what was wrong, but the weight of Vivian's authority pressed down on her like a stone. The cries grew louder. They pierced through chandeliers, through polished walls, through the patience of every guest present. One man muttered about suing the hotel for ruining his evening. A woman rolled her eyes, whispering, "How can the richest man in the room not control his own child?" Amanda swallowed hard, the heat of injustice burning in her chest. She wasn't meant to be noticed, wasn't meant to speak. Yet tonight, the line between silence and courage was blurring. The baby's cries weren't letting her hide in the shadows. They were pulling her forward. She whispered again under her breath, her voice trembling with memory and certainty. "I know what it is. I've seen it before." But across the marble floor, Vivian Montgomery straightened to her full height, her voice ringing out like a verdict. "Stay in your place, Amanda. Don't you dare touch that child." The words were final, but Amanda's heart told her this story wasn't going to end in silence. The cries had grown unbearable. They seemed to rattle the chandeliers, to echo against the marble until the air itself trembled. Jonathan Blackstone's face glistened with sweat, his shirt collar open, his composure shredded. The billionaire, feared in oil negotiations and revered on Wall Street, now stood helpless, rocking the stroller beam, back and forth with trembling hands. His son's screams had stripped him of every ounce of control he was known for. Guests shifted restlessly. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband, "Can't they just do something? Anything?" A group of executives in crisp Armani suits huddled near the bar, shaking their heads with irritation. Even the bellhops and receptionists, usually invisible like Amanda, looked on with wide, anxious eyes. The grand lobby of the plaza, normally a stage for elegance, was now nothing more than a theater of discomfort. Jonathan stopped moving. He stood frozen for a moment, staring down at his son as if the sound of his pain had finally broken something inside him. Then, his deep voice boomed through the hall with the weight of desperation. $50,000! The crowd fell silent, save for the baby's cries. Heads snapped toward him. He repeated, his voice cracking, $50,000 to anyone who can stop my son from crying within the next 10 minutes. A hush swept through the marble chamber. For the elites, $50,000 was pocket change, yet the rawness of his tone made it sound like a ransom, like a plea from a man who would trade his fortune for a moment of peace. The guests looked at one another, startled, unsure if he was serious. Amanda's breath caught in her throat. $50,000. More money than she could hope to save in years of scrubbing marble floors. Money that could pay off debts, pay for her siblings' tuition, and finish her own degree. Her heart thundered, not with greed, but with the crushing knowledge that she could actually do it. She could help him. She knew exactly what Henry needed. Vivian Montgomery, standing like a queen at the center of the hall, gave a sharp laugh that carried easily across the crowd. "Did you hear that?" she sneered, turning toward Amanda with her icy smile. $50,000, more than you could dream of making in 2 years on your knees with that mop. But let's be honest, dear, someone like you could never achieve such a thing. A ripple of cruel amusement spread among a few guests, their laughter hushed but stinging. Amanda lowered her gaze, cheeks burning, but not from shame. It was something else, anger, heavy and hot, rising inside her like fire. The baby's screams cut through again, pulling her eyes back to Henry. His tiny body twisted, arching in pain, just like Marcus had all those years ago. She saw her little brother again, frail and gasping, when doctors ignored her pleas until it was nearly too late. Her throat tightened. She couldn't stand by, not again. Her fingers dug into the rag she held, trembling as if the cloth itself held her decision. She had been invisible for 3 years, cleaning these same polished stones night after night, while Vivian looked down on her like dirt. But tonight, with that helpless child crying in agony and the billionaire's voice cracking in desperation, something inside Amanda refused to remain invisible. She took a breath so deep it felt like it might shatter her chest. The lobby blurred around her, the whispers of the wealthy melting into background noise. Only the baby mattered now, only the truth she knew in her bones. Amanda rose slowly from her knees, the rag slipping from her hands onto the marble. For the first time in years, every step she took forward felt like stepping into a spotlight she had never been allowed to stand in. Vivian's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as glass. "Don't you dare!" Amanda's gaze, steady and unflinching, met hers. But her words, soft and calm, were directed at Jonathan Blackstone. "Sir, I think I know what's wrong with your son." The hall went still, every breath caught, every eye fixed on the cleaning lay, daring to step beyond her place. Jonathan Blackstone turned sharply at the sound of Amanda's voice. His eyes, bloodshot and frantic, locked onto the young woman in the faded cleaning uniform who stood with trembling hands but steady resolve. For a moment, the weight of the room shifted. The billionaire's desperation collided with the quiet courage of a woman who had been invisible for too long. Vivian Montgomery moved first. Her heels clicked like gunshots as she stepped between Amanda and the stroller. Her manicured hand raised as though she could physically swat the words out of Amanda's mouth. "You? You think you know what's wrong with him?" Her laugh rang cruel and high, bouncing off the marble walls. "This is priceless. A cleaning lady of all people giving medical advice in front of our most important guests. Truly, we've descended into madness." Her laughter stung like acid, and the guests who moments earlier whispered in irritation now leaned in eagerly. There was nothing society loved more than a scandal unfolding live. Phones slipped discreetly from pockets, screens lit up. Some were recording. Amanda swallowed, but her gaze didn't waver. "It isn't hunger. It isn't exhaustion," she said softly, her words cutting through the stillness left after Vivian's mockery. "Look at the way he arches his back, the way his fists stay clenched, the way he refuses the bottle. That's reflux, severe reflux likely mixed with colic. If you keep trying to lay him flat, the pain will only get worse." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vivian barked out a sharp, dismissive laugh, louder this time, her face flushed with amusement that felt almost manic. "Did you hear that? She's diagnosing complex infant conditions in the middle of a lobby with nothing but a mop and bucket to her name. A high school dropout playing pediatrician, what a joke." The sting of those words pressed against Amanda's chest, but anger steadied her voice. "I didn't finish high school," she admitted, her tone calm, deliberate. "But I raised 2 younger brothers after my mother died. One of them had the same condition. I learned the hard way what doctors ignored. I know these signs because I lived them. I've studied them for years." Vivian's smirk faltered. The lobby grew taut with silence, the only sound Henry's shrill cries. Even Jonathan hesitated, his hands hovering uncertainly over the stroller, his eyes flicking between Vivian's venom and Amanda's quiet certainty. Then a new voice broke through, a voice rich with age and authority. "She's right." All heads turned. From a leather armchair near the fireplace rose an elegant, silver-haired woman. Her posture was regal, her eyes sharp despite her years. She carried the kind of presence that silenced a room without trying. "I am Dr. Catherine Wells," she announced, her voice steady and firm. 40 years in pediatrics. I retired 5 years ago, and I can tell you this young woman is absolutely correct. The signs are unmistakable." Gasps rippled through the hall, phones tilted higher, eager to capture every second. Vivian's face drained of color. "Doctor, with all due respect, this is absurd. This employee is overstepping. She is trying to manipulate Mr. Blackstone's grief for personal gain." Dr. Wells's eyes narrowed, her tone icy. "Manipulation? No. What I see is someone with practical knowledge, the kind you cannot buy with degrees or money. What I also see," she said, her gaze locking on Vivian with surgical precision, "is prejudice masquerading as professionalism." Amanda's chest rose and fell, her heart pounding as though the walls themselves were leaning in on her. For years she had been nothing but a shadow, polishing marble while people like Vivian laughed at her existence. Yet now, before the wealthy and powerful, a respected doctor was standing by her side. Jonathan Blackstone pressed his palms against the stroller, his breath shaking. For the first time in hours, his eyes were not on his son's agony, but on Amanda, this young woman whose voice carried more conviction than all the staff and advisors who had tried and failed. The lobby had become a courtroom. Amanda Silva, the cleaning lady, was no longer invisible. She was on trial, judged by strangers, ridiculed by her superior, and defended by a retired doctor who had nothing to gain. And all of it hinged on one question lingering in the billionaire's mind. Did he dare trust her? Jonathan Blackstone's throat felt tight, the weight of every eye in the lobby pressing on him like stone. The air was heavy with judgment, the silence between Henry's cries sharp as broken glass. His son's face was blotched red, his tiny chest heaving with ragged gasps, each wail louder than the last. Time was running out. He could feel it. Vivian Montgomery seized the pause with the skill of a woman who had built her career out of controlling moments. She stepped forward, her heels striking the marble like a gavel. "Mr. Blackstone," she said with mock sympathy, her voice dripping with poisoned sugar, "I implore you not to trust this nonsense. If anything goes wrong, if the press learns you let a janitor experiment on your child, the scandal will be catastrophic. This woman is not trained, not certified, not qualified. She is a cleaner, paid to mop floors, not diagnose infants." Her words landed hard, drawing nods from a few skeptical guests. The whispering began again, venomous and quick, slithering through the room. A woman murmured, "He's desperate." A man near the bar whispered, "This could ruin him." Amanda's pulse pounded in her ears, but she didn't flinch. For years she had been silenced, ridiculed, overlooked. But Henry's cries, those piercing, agonizing cries, pushed her beyond fear. She took a small step closer, her eyes fixed not on Vivian but on Jonathan. "Sir," she said, her voice calm, steady, cutting through the static of whispers. "You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me. But I know your son's pain. I know it because I've lived it." Her gaze softened, remembering, and her voice carried a tremor of memory. "My little brother Marcus nearly died when no one believed me. They told me his cries were normal, that it would pass. But I saw the truth in his eyes, just like I see it now in Henry's." Jonathan's jaw flexed. His eyes flicked to his son, then back to Amanda, torn between fear of ridicule and the raw, aching desperation of a father. His hands tightened around the stroller handle until his knuckles whitened. Vivian stepped closer, almost pleading now, her mask of arrogance cracking. "Sir, please, this is reckless. She's manipulating you. Do you know the risks? What if she drops him? What if he chokes? What if—" "Enough!" Jonathan's voice thundered through the hall, silencing everything. Vivian's protests, the crowd's murmurs, even Amanda's pounding heart. He turned, his eyes sweeping over the guards, the staff, the sea of curious faces. His voice was hoarse but resolute. "Let her try." The words hit the marble like a verdict. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted higher, recording. Some guests leaned forward in fascination, others in disbelief. Dr. Catherine Wells gave a single, firm nod, her approval sealing the moment. Vivian's face flushed red, fury spilling into every line. "You'll regret this," she hissed under her breath. But her power was slipping, her authority unraveling thread by thread in the presence of a crying baby, and a billionaire who had finally made his choice. Amanda's legs trembled, but her steps were steady as she crossed the marble floor toward Henry. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, each second stretching into eternity. She could feel dozens of eyes burning into her back, some filled with scorn, others with hope, but none of that mattered. All she saw was the baby, tiny, fragile, and suffering. Her palms, calloused from years of scrubbing, tingled as though they already knew the weight they were about to carry. She paused only for a breath, then whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "I won't fail you." Jonathan stepped aside, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths, and gestured toward his son. For the first time in his life, the man who commanded empires was placing everything, his pride, his reputation, his heart, in the hands of a cleaning lady. The lobby seemed to inhale all at once, a room of strangers holding its breath together. Amanda reached out, and the world waited. Amanda's hand hovered over the stroller, her breath caught in her throat. For a fleeting moment, she felt the weight of every pair of eyes pressing down on her, their judgment hot against her skin. The lobby had gone unnervingly quiet, the only sound Henry's anguished cries, raw, broken, and relentless. Even the clinking of glasses at the bar had stopped. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see if a cleaning lady could do what money and power had failed to accomplish. Her calloused hands moved with a precision born not of formal training, but of necessity and love. She slipped her arms beneath the trembling child, lifting him with a gentleness that felt both instinctive and rehearsed, from countless nights in a dim apartment, holding her little brother through similar cries. Henry writhed against her chest at first, his tiny fists beating weakly against her shoulder, his sobs still echoing through the grand chamber. But Amanda didn't flinch. She pressed him close, supporting his fragile head, and adjusted his position, upright, tilted slightly forward, creating just enough space to ease the reflux burning inside him. "Shh," she whispered, her voice soft as velvet, meant for him alone. "I know, little one. I know it hurts, but I've got you now." The crowd leaned forward. Some guests had their phones lifted high, others clutched their chests, unable to believe what they were watching. Jonathan Blackstone stood rigid, his powerful hands balled into fists at his sides, fear and hope colliding on his face. And Vivian Montgomery, she stared as if she'd just been struck, her lips pressed into a thin line, fury dancing in her eyes. Amanda's hand began a slow, rhythmic movement across the baby's back. Not random pats, but deliberate pressure, circling gently in the spots she had once memorized from borrowed medical books and long nights of trial and error. She rocked on her heels, steady and sure, whispering soothing phrases between his broken sobs. At first, Henry resisted. His cries sharpened, a desperate protest against the pain gnawing inside him. For a few agonizing seconds, it seemed nothing would change, that perhaps Vivian would be right and Amanda would be branded a fool in front of them all. But then, something shifted. Henry's tiny body softened ever so slightly. His cries faltered, not gone, but no longer wild and unrestrained. He clung to Amanda's uniform, his small fingers curling into the fabric as if holding on for dear life. Amanda kept her movements steady, her breathing calm, her voice a gentle lullaby against his ear. The silence spread slowly through the lobby, not absolute yet, but enough to ignite a spark of disbelief in the crowd. Jonathan's eyes widened, his lips parted, as if he dared not speak for fear of breaking the fragile spell. Amanda pressed her cheek gently against Henry's soft hair, her eyes misting with memory. "That's it, sweetheart. Just breathe. You're not alone." Then it happened, like a storm breaking. Henry's cries collapsed into hiccuping sobs, then into soft whimpers, and finally, silence. The baby rested against her chest, his breathing evening out, his tiny body melting into her arms as though, at last, he had found safety. A collective gasp swept through the hall, followed by the low murmur of astonishment. One woman whispered, "My God." Another man muttered, "She did it." The glow from dozens of phones caught Amanda's face in the moment, her expression calm, maternal, and unshakably sure. Jonathan staggered forward, his knees nearly buckling as he stared at his son, peaceful for the first time in hours. His voice came out as a broken whisper. How? How did you do that?" Amanda didn't answer right away. She only smiled faintly, her hands still moving in gentle rhythm across Henry's back. For her, this wasn't magic. It was knowledge born of pain, of nights the world never saw. And now, in this gilded lobby, that invisible knowledge had finally been witnessed. But the stillness didn't last long. A sharp voice cut through the awe, trembling with fury. "Vivian Montgomery." No, this is coincidence, a fluke, nothing more. She doesn't know what she's doing." The spell of silence fractured, but the crowd wasn't so easily convinced. Their eyes no longer looked at Vivian as a figure of authority. They looked at her as an obstacle, a barrier between compassion and cruelty. Amanda, still holding Henry close, lifted her eyes. They weren't trembling now. They were steady, certain, and stronger than they had ever been. And in that moment, with the world watching, she had proven something money could never buy, the strength of lived experience. The lobby, for one glorious heartbeat, felt suspended in magic. A baby who had wailed for hours now rested in silence, his cheek pressed against Amanda's shoulder, his tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that soothed everyone who watched. Guests exchanged stunned glances, some mouths still open, others whispering disbelief. Jonathan Blackstone stood frozen, his powerful hands trembling, his eyes shining with something he hadn't felt in hours. Hope. Then, without warning, the fragile calm shattered. Henry's small body stiffened in Amanda's arms, his face contorted, and a violent spasm ran through him. Before anyone could react, the baby vomited, a harsh, messy eruption that drenched Amanda's uniform in half-digested formula, splattering across her arm and the pristine marble floor. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman squealed in disgust. A man in an Armani jacket pulled his wife back as if disaster had struck. Vivian Montgomery seized the moment like a vulture swooping onto a wounded prey. Her lips curled into a cruel smile, her voice sharp with triumphant venom. "There, you see? I warned you. She's making things worse. This is what happens when you let unqualified people touch what they cannot understand." Some guests murmured uneasily, torn between the spectacle and the undeniable relief that had preceded it. Phones recorded every second, zooming in on Amanda, her uniform stained, her face calm as stone. Amanda didn't flinch. She reached into her cleaning cart, pulling out a small, clean towel. With practiced hands, she wiped Henry's mouth, whispering softly to him, as if oblivious to the storm of judgment swirling around her. "Shh, sweetheart. That's it. Let it out. You're safe." Her voice was a lullaby, quiet but strong enough to pierce the marble hall more deeply than Vivian's shrill condemnation. She adjusted Henry upright again, her movements steady and sure, ignoring the vomit soaking her uniform. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't flustered. Her eyes glowed with the certainty of someone who had seen this before and knew exactly what came next. "This was expected," Amanda said evenly, her voice carrying through the hushed room. His stomach was rejecting the formula. It's the wrong kind for his system. The vomiting means the pressure is easing. Now he can finally begin to heal. Jonathan stepped closer, his gaze locked on his son, who, despite the mess, no longer writhed in agony. Henry's tiny fists unclenched, his cries reduced to soft whimpers. His face, once crimson with pain, softened to a tired pink as his body leaned trustingly against Amanda. Vivian sputtered, desperate to regain control. "Expected? Are you insane? This is a disaster. He could choke. He could—" "Enough." Jonathan's voice was sharp, cutting her words to ribbons. He didn't even look at Vivian. His eyes stayed fixed on Amanda, his son, and the miracle he had just witnessed. She knew this would happen. She was ready. His voice broke on the last word, not with anger, but with gratitude. Amanda's hands continued their gentle rhythm on Henry's back, her face serene, maternal, unwavering. To her, vomit wasn't a failure. It was part of the path to relief. Every parent who had lived through it would recognize the truth in her calm. The crowd leaned in closer now, many of them whispering with awe. One woman near the bar murmured to her friend, "She's not flustered at all. Look at her. She knows exactly what she's doing." Another voice added, "And the baby? He's calmer. She's right." Henry gave a soft sigh, his tiny head nuzzling into Amanda's shoulder. His eyes, glossy but no longer wild, blinked slowly, then closed. The silence that followed wasn't forced. It was natural, born from peace returning to a child who had suffered too long. Amanda looked down at him, her lips trembling into a small, private smile. "There you go, little one. You're going to be just fine." Jonathan exhaled a shaky breath, his voice hoarse. "My God!" His hand brushed over his son's hair, his eyes glistening as though he might collapse from relief. He turned to Amanda, his voice breaking. "You knew? All along. You knew." And just as the moment crystallized, the crowd erupted, some applauding softly, others murmuring into their phones, narrating what they had just witnessed. A wave of disbelief and admiration spread like wildfire. But in the shadows, Vivian Montgomery's face had twisted into something dangerous. Humiliation burned through her polished mask, replaced by raw, gnawing fury. She wasn't just losing control, she was losing everything. And Amanda Silva, a cleaning lady she had mocked for 3 years, had done the unthinkable right before her eyes. The balance of power in the marble lobby had shifted, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The hush in the marble lobby did not last long. It shattered under the flash of cameras and the glow of screens, dozens of phones lifted high to capture what had just happened. A billionaire's baby, soothed not by doctors or nannies, but by a cleaning lady whose uniform was now streaked with spit-up and formula. The image was too powerful, too raw, too human to ignore. From the back of the crowd, a woman rose from her leather chair. She was younger than Dr. Wells, dressed in business casual, her dark hair pulled back. She moved with quiet certainty, her phone already streaming, the little red dot glowing at the top of her screen. "Jessica Chun," she said softly as she approached. "Investigative journalist, Washington Post." She angled the phone deliberately, her voice steady. "For those watching, what you see is Amanda Silva, a cleaning staff member, succeed where professionals failed." Vivian Montgomery's head whipped around so fast it was as if her neck might snap. Her carefully crafted mask of authority crumbled the moment she realized what Jessica had said. "You're streaming this?" she hissed, her voice rising in pitch. Jessica turned the phone so the screen faced Vivian. The number of live viewers was already climbing past 40,000. Comments scrolled quickly. Words like "fire the manager," "Amanda is an angel," "bias in action" filling the chat. Vivian's breath caught, panic widening her eyes. "Turn that off. This is private property. You can't." "Oh, I can," Jessica replied, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "And I am. The world deserves to see this." The guests murmured in excitement. Some even angled their own phones to catch both Vivian's fury and Amanda's serene composure. It was no longer just a scene in a hotel lobby. It was a broadcast. Justice unspooling live, with every second captured for millions to replay. Jonathan Blackstone, still clutching the stroller handle with one hand, turned toward Vivian with a look that could cut through steel. "You tried to stop her," he said quietly, but the fury in his voice echoed like thunder. "You nearly cost my son his peace because of your prejudice." Vivian's lips quivered. "Mr. Blackstone, I only wanted to protect the hotel's reputation. Allowing a janitor to—" "Say it," Amanda's voice interrupted, calm but edged with steel. She still held Henry, rocking him gently, her stained uniform a badge of courage rather than shame. Her eyes met Vivian's unflinchingly. "Say what you really mean." The crowd stiffened. Dr. Wells folded her arms, her gaze fixed firmly on the manager, as if daring her to continue. The cameras zoomed closer. Vivian faltered, realizing too late that every word she spoke was being broadcast live to tens of thousands. She stammered, her voice weak now, stripped of its earlier venom. I only meant people like her." The words were a dagger she had plunged into herself. Gasps swept the hall, followed by a chorus of disbelieving murmurs. Phones captured every syllable. Within seconds, those words, people like her, were being typed into the live stream chat and shared across social media. Jessica's voice cut through with icy precision. "You all heard that. In 2025, in the lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel, an executive manager reduced a qualified woman to people like her." Vivian's face drained of color. Her knees seemed to wobble under the weight of what she had just unleashed. The whispers around her were no longer whispers. They were condemnation. Meanwhile, Amanda looked down at Henry, whose tiny chest rose and fell steadily now, his face softened into the peace of sleep. She kissed the crown of his head, whispering so gently it might have been for herself as much as for him. "You're safe now, little one." And that image, the billionaire's baby asleep in the arms of a cleaning lady, the manager sputtering in disgrace, the crowd rallying around justice, spread like fire across every screen in the room. Within minutes, Jessica's live stream crossed 100,000 viewers. The hashtags began trending. #Justice for Amanda. #Grand Plaza Bias. #Real Competence. The balance of power had shifted, and Vivian Montgomery, once untouchable in her heels and perfume, now stood stripped bare in the unforgiving light of truth. Amanda Silva, the woman invisible for 3 years, was no longer unseen. She was a story, a revolution, streaming live to the world. The glow from the phones had turned the marble lobby into a stage, and Amanda Silva stood at the very center of it, her uniform stained, her hair damp with sweat, yet her presence radiated more dignity than anyone else in the room. Henry slept soundly against her chest, the faintest smile playing on his lips as though all. He sensed he had found safety. The crowd was silent now, not with judgment, but with reverence. Even the wealthiest guests who once looked at her as invisible now regarded her with awe. Jonathan Blackstone's chest heaved as he stared at his son, then at the woman who had done what money and status had failed to achieve. His voice, usually commanding and cold in business, trembled with gratitude. "Amanda." He paused, searching for words that would carry the weight of what she had just given him. "You didn't just call my son. You saved me. You saved us." Amanda shook her head gently, her voice steady but humble. "I didn't save you, sir. I just listened." I looked at him as more than a problem to silence. He was telling us what was wrong. We only needed to hear it. Vivian Montgomery let out a bitter laugh, desperate to claw back some control. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Mr. Blackstone, please, don't let yourself be manipulated. This woman is a cleaner. She's nothing more than staff." "Enough!" Jonathan's roar silenced her, his fury sharp enough to shake the chandelier above. He turned to face her fully now, his eyes blazing. "You've been standing in my hotel for 15 years, and in one night you nearly cost my son his health because of your arrogance." His jaw tightened. "You are finished here. Effective immediately." Gasps broke through the crowd. Some clapped softly, others shook their heads in disapproval at Vivian. She went pale, swaying slightly on her heels, as if the marble floor itself had crumbled beneath her. Jonathan turned back to Amanda, pulling a sleek business card from his pocket. He scribbled something on the back with a gold pen, his hand shaking. He held it out to her with the solemnity of a vow. "Amanda Silva, I would like to offer you the position of Director of Child Development at the Blackstone Foundation. Starting salary, $200,000 a year. Full benefits and any resources you need." The word sent ripples through the crowd. Phones shook as people tried to capture the moment. Amanda stared at the card, her heart racing, but her hand did not tremble when she took it. She looked at Henry, sleeping in her arms, then lifted her gaze to Jonathan. "I'll accept," she said softly, her voice echoing in the hushed lobby, "but only on one condition." Jonathan blinked, startled. "Anything." Amanda's chin lifted, her eyes burning with conviction. "I want to create unconscious bias training programs, not just here, but across every hotel, every company willing to listen. No one should be judged by the color of their skin or their uniform when they have knowledge that can save lives." The lobby erupted, not in whispers now, but in applause. Some guests clapped slowly, others with passion, their cheers reverberating through the marble hall. Dr. Wells pressed a hand to her chest, tears glimmering in her eyes. Jessica Chun's livestream comments exploded. "She's a hero. She's a leader. This is history." Jonathan's eyes softened, his voice thick with emotion. "Done. You'll have everything you need." Amanda's grip tightened gently around Henry as she handed him back to his father. "Keep him upright after feedings, small amounts, every 2 hours. He'll be okay now." Jonathan cradled his son carefully, his lips trembling as he looked at Amanda. "You've given me back my boy." Vivian, once the queen of the marble hall, stood trembling and pale, ignored by the cameras that once sought her smile. For years she had wielded power through fear and prejudice, but tonight, in the glare of phone screens and truth, she was nothing more than a shadow fading into disgrace. And Amanda Silva, a woman who had been invisible for 3 long years, had just turned humiliation into a revolution. 6 months later, the Grand Plaza lobby was just another memory, a marble stage where humiliation had been transformed into history. The story had traveled far beyond those gilded walls. Amanda Silva's name had become a headline, a trending hashtag, a quiet anthem for workers everywhere who had been told they were invisible. But tonight, she stood at the threshold of something much greater. The air was alive with the hum of cameras and voices. Reporters lined the street outside a newly built facility on the edge of the city, its glass walls glowing warmly against the night. The sign above the entrance gleamed in gold, the Amanda Silva Child Development Center. Amanda stood at the doors in a crisp white coat embroidered with her name. Her hair was neatly tied back, her uniform no longer a cleaner's smock, but the attire of a director, a leader. She looked out at the crowd gathered, dozens of families, officials, community leaders, and hotel workers who had come to see her cut the inaugural ribbon. The flash of cameras captured every flicker of emotion in her face. Beside her, Jonathan Blackstone held his son Henry, now a chubby-cheeked 1-year-old who gurgled happily in his father's arms. When Amanda turned, Henry stretched his little arms out to her with a bright, toothless grin. "Director Silva," he babbled, repeating the title he had learned to associate with her. The crowd melted into laughter and applause. Jonathan's proud smile was unguarded, vulnerable, the kind of expression a billionaire never showed in boardrooms. Amanda lifted Henry into her arms, kissing his forehead before handing him back. "That's why we're here," she said into the microphone, her voice steady and rich with emotion. "So no child suffers needlessly. So no one is ignored because of where they work, what they look like, or what others assume they don't know." The applause swelled. Cameras captured every word. Behind Amanda, a banner displayed the center's mission. to listen, to heal, to see the unseen. Dr. Catherine Wells, appointed as the medical coordinator of the center, stepped forward with tears glistening in her eyes. In just 6 months, she announced proudly, Amanda's vision has already identified and treated over 300 children who were misdiagnosed or dismissed. Her work is saving lives, reshaping how we see child development. The crowd roared with approval. Jessica Chun, the journalist whose live stream had captured Amanda's rise, stood at the edge of the platform, camera rolling once more. Her latest documentary had been nominated for awards, and she smiled as if she knew this was another chapter in a story that still had miles to go. Amanda's eyes scanned the crowd, and for a brief moment, her gaze caught on someone standing alone at the very edge of the street. Vivian Montgomery. Her once sleek hair was dull, her tailored suits replaced with a cheap blouse and apron. She stood behind the counter of a roadside diner now, wiping tables for minimum wage. Her once sharp eyes flickered with bitterness, but also something else, shame. When Amanda's gaze met hers, Vivian looked away quickly, retreating into the shadows where no cameras followed. Amanda didn't smile at her downfall. Instead, she lifted her chin higher, her voice carrying with quiet dignity. The best revenge is not destruction. The best revenge is building something so meaningful that it transforms the world around you. The ribbon was cut, the crowd erupted, and the doors opened to a new beginning. Inside, bright murals covered the walls, painted by volunteers. Rooms filled with toys, therapy equipment, and child-sized chairs waited for the little ones who would come seeking help. Staff bustled inside, specialists, teachers, caregivers, all chosen by Amanda herself, each one trained not just in medicine or childcare, but in empathy. As the celebration swelled, Henry wriggled in his father's arms, stretching toward Amanda again. Jonathan let him go, and the boy toddled on unsteady legs across the stage, collapsing into Amanda's waiting arms. She hugged him close, tears pricking her eyes as the cameras clicked furiously. In that moment, under the glow of 1,000 lights, Amanda Silva was no longer invisible. She was a force, a revolution, a reminder that courage and compassion can change the course of countless lives. And somewhere in the crowd, in the hearts of millions who would watch this footage later, a seed of belief was planted, that the unseen are often the ones who carry the power to heal the world.